Hello lions and epic gamers, Aaron here, back with another video. With the Chinese New Year just around the corner, it's only fitting that we finally get a character in Genshin that'll help us celebrate. Introducing Ming, our premier lion dancing king, here to grant us all fortune in the new year. But before we get into what our most fortunate boy has in store for us, I just have to say that if you do like my content, why not take a bite out of that Chinese almond cookie flavored subscribe button down below. But with that, let's move on to the video, starting off with the overview. Ming is a Pyro main DPS unit with an emphasis on his plunged attack damage output. Ming's normal attacks are nothing to write home about, however, they do have relatively large multipliers and a normal ICD. Another thing to mention is the time they take to cast. Both his first and second hits take about half a second to come out, his third hit takes a full 1 second to come out, and his final fourth hit takes about 1.5 seconds to come out. Then we have Ming's skill, which has him rush forward or toward an enemy. If this rush collides with something, including an enemy, a wall, or anything the like, he will leap into the air and then use a special plunged attack, dealing pyro damage in an AoE around himself when he does. Upon landing, Ming will reduce his own HP by 15%. His skill's plunged attack also has no ICD and will generate 2 elemental particles once every 3 seconds. Ming's burst has him apply pyro to himself on cast, after which he enters the Wushu stance for 12 seconds, granting him 50% interruption resistance during it. Then he tosses an explosion at an area in front of himself. This explosion deals a massive amount of pyro damage in an AoE while healing himself for 30% of his max HP. After the burst is cast, a little lion friend will hop out and run toward Ming. When it reaches him while he's in the Wushu state, it will reset the cooldown of his elemental skill. Every time Ming uses his skill's plunged attack while in the Wushu state, another little lion friend will be summoned, though only one lion friend can be active at a time. Last thing I want to note is that the initial damage of his burst has a normal 2.5 seconds or 3 hits ICD. Ming's first ascension passive restores 6% of his HP to himself over the course of 1 second. This isn't any amazing buff, but it does help him sustain himself through the HP reduction his skill deals. Additionally, it will help him stack the Marae Hunter artifact set a bit quicker. Ming's 4th ascension passive is much better though, as it grants him a buff depending on his current HP. If his current HP is at 50% of his max HP or more, his skill's plunge attack deals 20% more damage. If he's below 50% of his max HP, he receives a 20% incoming healing bonus. This passive is much more beneficial for Ming than his last one, mostly because of the percent damage bonus it grants his skill's plunged attack. However, it also allows him to stay alive much easier than he would otherwise, which is a nice bonus. Ming uses every single part of his kit, so when it comes to talent priority, we have to weigh how much of each source he uses. With that in mind, his elemental skill is first. This is where almost 60% of his damage comes from, so putting the most into it is much better than anything else. After that, level his burst next, as it will deal more damage than his normals. Only then should you level his normals. However, if you do intend to use a C6 Bennett with him, then you want to level his normals before his burst, as they will deal more damage. Ming has a lot of options when it comes to combos. As a traditional main DPS unit, his main combo will start out with either his burst, skill plunge, and skill plunge, or skill plunge and then burst. After that, alternate between using 3 normal attacks and his skill's plunge attack for the highest damage output. If Xian Yun is on the team, then you also have the option of alternating between normal plunge attacks and his skill's plunged attacks. However, his normal attacks deal a much more significant portion of his damage than his plunge attacks do, so using the normal attack combo will still usually be better than using plunged attacks. Because his main damage source is his elemental skill, and because his elemental skill has a short 6-second cooldown, he does have the option to be used as a quick swap DPS. This will net him about the same amount of skill plunges as if he was used on field. However, this will usually be best when he's not used in vape teams, since those comps are much better suited for a main DPS playstyle. If using him as a quick swap DPS, use his skill after swapping through 2 other units. Then continue alternating between Ming and his teammates until all buffs are gone, and then repeat until victorious. But with Ming's space kit over and done with, let's move on to see what upgrades his constellations offer him. Ming's first constellation grants him a 15% max HP heal when the little friend from his burst comes back to him. This is a nice little quality of life bonus, but the only actual benefit to this constellation is that it allows him to use Furina without having to rely on a healer. However, most Furina teams still want a healer, and most Ming teams want a healer too, which essentially means this constellation does next to nothing. The Ming C2 grants him a 20% attack bonus when the healing he receives overflows. This incentivizes running a healer with him to guarantee that overheal. However, this is not that large of an incentive since it'll only increase his damage by about 3%. His third constellation increases the level of his skill by 3. Unlike the bonuses from his other constellations, this level increase is pretty valuable since his skill's plunge attack is his main damage source. This ends up leading to about an 8% damage increase, which is pretty good for him. Ming's fourth constellation grants him 2 energy whenever his skill's plunge attack hits an enemy. While this isn't a direct damage increase, it does mean he can focus less on energy recharge in his subsets, which allows him to build more into damage. The stat leniency it offers ends up making his C4 into his second best constellation, as it will increase his damage by between 7 to 10% depending on if the weapon he's using has energy recharge or has an energy generating mechanic. His C5 increases the level of his burst by 3. This is not that great though, since his burst doesn't deal an insane amount of damage and is mainly used as a stim. However, a damage increase is still a damage increase, and a 6% one is no different. Ming's final constellation buffs his skill's plunge attack, increasing its crit rate by 20%, increasing its crit damage by 40%, and increasing its AoE by about 50%. This AoE increase is the equivalent of going from Kuki's skills AoE to Kazuha's press skills AoE. This is a large damage increase for him no matter what, but it also increases his consistency in AoE content by a massive amount. This is so effective on him that it can increase his damage by anywhere between 18.5% and 50%, depending on how many enemies are around him. However, it will normally lead to more around a 25% damage increase, which is on the lower end, but it's still freaking phenomenal. All around, Ming's constellations are pretty poor, yet are also invaluable to his damage output. However, most of this value is behind his C6, which is an absolute necessity for his total damage output. His other constellations aren't as great though, as they're all relatively minor damage increases that offer little other than damage. In terms of artifact options, Ming has a good amount he can use, though one will be vastly superior to the others. This superior option is the Mirai Shosei Hunter set. While he does not benefit from the 2-piece effect in most situations, he can usually easily cap the 4 pieces passive crit rate bonus. This buff is massive and will make up for any unused damage bonus the 2-piece effect offers. Other sets he can use that won't be as effective as Mirai Shosei are the Vermilion Hereafter set for the massive amount of attack, the Crimson Witch set, which he can also easily stack, Shimenawa's Reminiscence for the attack and massive percent damage bonus it offers him, the Gilded Dream set for the large amount of elemental mastery it grants, or even Lava Walker if he's used in Mono Pyro or Burning-centric teams. For main stats, the best you can run is the normal HP, attack percent, pyro damage, and crit, specifically crit damage if using Mirai Shosei. If used in a vape team, you could swap the sands out for an elemental mastery one, but otherwise, there's not much else you can run on him here. For substats, it's important to get his burst up every rotation, so reaching his energy requirement is imperative. However, this requirement changes depending on whether or not he has a C4. Before this point, you're looking for about 175% energy recharge, but once his C4 is obtained, it'll drop to about 155% energy recharge. However, this energy recharge requirement can end up dropping even lower to 120% if he uses another skill at any point in the rotation when he's used as a main DPS. After that, he needs Elemental Mastery when used in vape comps. The goal here would be about 200 EM, but the team's buffs should also be taken into consideration here. After that, look for crit stats to around 75 to 150, and then keep aiming higher and higher. Also keep in mind that if he's using the Mirai Shosei set, then his crit cap will be 44% due to its passive and his C6. Attack percent can be worthwhile past this point, however, with the amount of vaporizes he has at his disposal, building more into Elemental Mastery can be better depending on the team. With artifacts done, let's move on to weapon options to continue gearing Ming up. First off, we have Skyward Pride, which is Ming's best claymore due to its very good stats and passive damage that scales really hard with Bennett's buff. However, if not using the vacuum blades provided by this weapon, or when using a support other than Bennett, this weapon will drop down to about 5th place. In second, we have Verdict, which would be his best weapon without conditions. This gorgeous axe offers an incredible amount of attack as well as a decent crit rate bonus. While he can never benefit from the elemental skill damage bonus from its passive effect. The raw base stats this axe offers will always guarantee it a spot in its top 3 best weapon options. Third is Serpent Spine, because it's the freaking Serpent Spine. This weapon is fantastic all around. The only downside this weapon has is that he can't be hit while using it, else he loses the buff. If you're having trouble keeping this Claymore's passive stacked, then the other weapons are better for you. After that, we have the Beacon of the Reed Sea, which is very similar to Verdict. However, it requires the character to actively take damage, which no one other than Dea can activate reliably. If it does not have max stacks, this weapon will be worse off for him than Verdict, but if it does, it can be slightly better. Up next is Redhorn Stone Thresher. Due to the massive amount of crit damage it offers, and due to the large flat damage it offers normal and charged attacks. While it won't be as good if just using plunge attacks, it will still be valuable due to the insane crit damage stat it offers. After that, we have the Elemental Mastery weapons, the Portable Power Saw, the Mailed Flower, and the Rain Slasher. The Portable Power Saw is first, as it offers a crap ton of Elemental Mastery and an energy generating passive effect, which puts it above the others. The downside is that this weapon needs to be obtained from the weapon banner. That's where the Mailed Flower comes in, as it is not too far behind while also being free-to-play friendly. While Rain Slasher is the last of the 3, it can surpass both of them if he's used without units that grant a crap ton of damage percent. However, they will generally all be about the same in terms of damage no matter the team. In 9th place, we have the Ultimate Overlord's Mega Magic Sword. This weapon offers Ming a great amount of attack and enough energy recharge to help him easily reach his requirement, which is why it's above our next weapon, the Wolf's Gravestone. This Claymore is good, but it only offers a crap ton of attack. This focus on attack for a weapon is not good enough for it to compete with the other weapons above that flex out into other much more needed stats. While you can use any of the Claymores in the list, the only weapons I can actually recommend using on Ming are Verdict and Skyward Pride for 5-star options, and Rain Slasher, Portable Power Saw, or the Mailed Flower for 4-star options. All others don't offer enough damage or are too expensive, or the minuscule damage increase you'd get by swapping over. However, the Ultimate Overlord's Mega Magic Sword is another good option that's great for every single situation, even outside of reaction-focused teams. But with builds done, let's move on to who Ming synergizes well with. Xianyun is first. Due to her ability to massively buff Ming's plunge attack damage output, her ability to heal through his health reduction, and her ability to grant him use of his plunge attacks. On top of that, she's Anemo, so she can easily shred the resistances of Pyro for Ming to take advantage of. Additionally, because Ming will spam plunge attacks with her on the team, he will enable her burst to deal more damage through its coordinated attacks more than most other units can. However, a massive amount of what Xianyun offers is behind the Viridescent Venrir set, so if you can't swirl Pyro consistently using Xianyun, then almost any other support will do better in the slot that she would take up. Up next is Furina, who is able to massively buff Ming's damage output, who can increase his healing received, who can help Ming stack Moresho Say faster, and who can apply Hydro for Ming to vape off of. Ming's health reduction and self-healing mechanic also helps Furina stack her Fanfare buff insanely quickly, which will lead to the team dealing more damage than some other teams can. Furina is so strong with Ming that she will end up being almost a staple in any comp he wants to utilize. Last up is Bennett, who is a powerhouse support unit for buffing Ming's damage output. While the massive attack stat he offers is tremendously powerful, Bennett can also buff Ming with the Instructor set, which is also an insane buff for Ming to use. Additionally, Bennett's C6 will grant Ming a Pyro damage bonus and will infuse him with Pyro to allow him to vaporize off of his normal and plunge attacks. Bennett offers so many buffs to Ming that he will double the damage output of our Lion Dancer. However, all these buffs come with a very large downside, as Bennett relies on his deployable field with a limited range. This gets even worse when we consider Ming's innate knockback on his plunge attacks, which can force enemies out of Bennett's circle. While this is a major downside, I don't think that this is enough of a reason to not use them together, since the buffs Bennett offers are so large that he will enable Ming to one-shot lightweight enemies anyway. Ming benefits so much from Bennett that I would say Bennett might even be mandatory to use with him, but these synergies are only pieces to a whole puzzle. So let's move on and fit these pieces together to make some team compositions. First up, we have his signature Vaporized team comps. Here, the focus is on Ming's vaporized damage output and buffing it in any way possible while still getting those vaporizes. However, sometimes when using the Enebo character, keeping the Hydro aura up using just Furita can be incredibly difficult. If that is the case, double Hydro or just using Xingqiu can be the better option. After that, we have a different sort of comp that we never see, Forward Melt. This can work with Ming because its application is rather low when compared to other main DPS Pyro units. These teams are very similar to the last ones, except we don't have the best off-field applicators, sub-DPS, and damage buffers. These comps have such underwhelming units that you're pretty much still forced to run Furina with them to make them worth it over plain old vape teams. The next comp we have are Mono Pyro teams. We've seen these all before though, so I won't dwell on them. Instead, let's move on to our last comp. Ending off our team comps, we have Overload teams, which became accessible due to Chevreuse. In these teams, Ming will be the only character to trigger the Overload reaction due to his slow application. This is not ideal, but because he can chase enemies incredibly easily due to his skills dash, he will prove to be one of the better main DPS units in these comps. Since he's a Pyro main DPS unit, he realistically only has those few comps to work with. So with that done, it's time to finish off the video with his rating. Ming has a lot of damage available to him when he's at C6. His ability to vaporize nearly all of his attacks with large multipliers makes him a force to be reckoned with. However, he lacks a lot of the stats he needs to scale with until he's at C6. Once at this point, he is incredible, and he will deal a grotesque amount of damage, enough to rival even some of the best. So I'll give him a 5 out of 5 once at C6, but before then, he would instead wind up around a 3 out of 5. In terms of application, Ming's is rather bad. His AoEs are okay. However, the rate at which he applies the element is incredibly slow and never gets any better. It's so minor that I think he deserves a small 1.5 out of 5 here. For offensive buffs, he's got nothing. Nothing. 0 out of 5. However, he can actually be a pretty decent battery. He has the potential to spam his skill to generate a good amount of energy for his team due to his burst. On top of that, his skill has a short cooldown, meaning that he can be used around the end of a rotation to help battery another unit. It's not a lot of particles that he generates, but the Favonius Greatsword can help a lot since it syncs up with his cooldown perfectly. With all this in mind, I think an above average 3 out of 5 works well for him here. In terms of defensive capabilities, all he has is the 6% max HP healing on his Ascension 1 passive, the 30% max HP healing on his burst, and the 15% max HP healing from his first Constellation. However, he has a lot of self-damage, which can only be out-healed when he has his first Constellation. His healing is only dealt to himself too, making it normally worse than what an actual healer can provide. Despite that, it is still some defensive utility, and it will help keep him alive, so I think he earns a 0.5 out of 5 for defensive utility. Ming has little flexibility and versatility. He can be used only in a few comps, and he can only act as a DPS in all these comps. He's so limited that I think he earns a low 1 out of 5 here. Ming is a simple main DPS unit with the ability to flex into a quick swap role. He has very little outside of his damage, so his value relies solely on his ability to be used as a DPS. Thankfully, he deals some of the most damage a main DPS can, making him the best 4-star main DPS unit in the game. However, this value is only unlocked once at C6. Before then, he's incredibly lackluster due to his mid damage output without anything to make up for it, so I think he earns a below average 2 out of 5 once at C6. But before then, I think he deserves a poor rating of 1.5 out of 5. Now that's not to say I think he's bad, it's just that he's a main DPS, which usually suffers more than any other class for my rating section due to their ability to only deal damage. While his rating may be low, I still think he's rather good, especially for new players. However, those that have a lot of 5 stars and some really good 5 stars will not see much use in him unless they really like him. But those are just my thoughts on Ming. What do you all think of him? Do you think he's better than I do? Do you think he's worse? Is he going to be your free 4-star when Lantern Rite comes around? Tell me your thoughts down below. But with that, I will skedaddle. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you all next time. Bye bye!